I am Heidi Benjaminson, your host of Confidence Coaching, a podcast for mothers of teenagers who want to have strong relationships with their children. Life isn't a spectator sport. Success comes to those who show up every day with a pocket full of courage, grit, and a little sparkle. I'm glad you're here. Hello. Welcome to episode 135, Alisha's story of gifting confidence to our children. I am so glad you're here again. Welcome. Don't you just love podcasts? I listen to so many, and just yesterday, I was remembering back to a time without podcasts, which frankly wasn't that long ago. All these things we didn't know that we couldn't live without. Okay, make sure you check out the weekly YouTube videos. They're short, y'all, like 5 minutes that add more detail to each topic. Or maybe I give you another example of a tool that I teach you. You can get a link on my episode website or via Facebook or Instagram or in my episode email. Today's episode is very special, and I want to get right to it. Well over a year ago, I started coaching Alisha, who is also a dear friend and someone I've known over a decade, as you'll hear. She reached out and very courageously said, "I need your help." What neither of us knew was how the year would go and exactly how investing in her own confidence, her own emotional management, would be one of the most priceless gifts she could give her children. Now, listen to our interview. You'll hear it isn't coaching that you get with me. You get confidence, self-love, and grace that is then modeled and transferred to your children. Hear how Alisha has done just this. Okay, Alisha, I am so grateful that you were willing to be interviewed on my podcast. I have absolutely loved coaching you, and you have just had some amazing experiences, and the different ways that coaching has helped you change in this last year has been wonderful. And I think it's going to be really, really insightful for my listeners. Let's start with how you and we've known each other a long time, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we've known each other maybe 12
years. Yeah. When our oldest were in first grade, I remember going into the first grade class and they were in the same class, and you guys had just moved there and said, "Can I put you down as my emergency contact?" And and now they're in college.
They have flown the coop. They just finished their first year of college. So
why don't you briefly introduce yourself and then tell us what made you reach out for coaching a little about a year and a half or so ago? What did you think that I could help you with?
So my name is Alisha. I am the mom of 2 daughters. We live really, really busy lives. We lived really, really busy lives. I felt like I was going one place or the other. And I'm just going to kind of jump into this coaching question because my oldest is 11 years older than my youngest. And I had her scheduled sometimes 2 activities after school a day. But we were very, very busy. And then my youngest came in 2014, and we were still really, really busy. And then all of a sudden things slowed down. And I appreciated the slowdown. My oldest had gotten a driver's license, and so she was able to drive herself and do her own thing. So I wasn't accompanying her to after school things. And then she went to a high school that was part of a university program. So I had this intro to what it might look like for college, but she was still home with me. At that time, I was really, really involved with a lot of the things that she did. I was on several boards and a lot of decision making, not for her, but for various groups. And I had decided to get off all of these boards. And so in some way, I had lost this sense of identity because I was no longer busy. I was no longer my schedule wasn't full. Of course, I still had, a youngster at home. I mean, she was 5 at the time. And we stayed busy, but then the pandemic hit. And then everything shut down. And I was acutely aware that I was going into like this, I had had a few situations happen, and I was finding myself kind of looping and living in like the past in a way. Like I would keep having these old experiences go over and over in my head. Like I could have done this different. I should have done this. I could have, would have, all of those kinds of things that we say to ourselves. And I kind of just felt myself being drawn into this place that I felt a little bit powerless. And then the pandemic hits, and then you don't have any kind of like distractions. So you become really aware of like your surroundings and yourself.
And what's going through your head,
you, right?
Yeah, when you're
going
stuck
through
with
your head. And I was thinking all the time, and that thinking was not always going to the right places. I wish it was kind of like I was on a treadmill sometimes. And I could, now that I look back on it, that treadmill was not leading me anywhere. It was leading me nowhere, but into a really stuck place. Like it just felt stuck. I still lived my normal day-to-day life, but I still felt very stuck, very vulnerable. I felt very judged. My husband at the time had been called into he had taken a new job within his company that was a lot more stressful than what his previous position was. And as well, he received a church calling that put him into a very visible position, and in turn put me in that position too. And I remember sitting in one of the training meetings, and I have always like kind of patted myself on the back for being like this very real person with people, that I'm just kind of take me as I am.
Yeah.
And I, in some places, in some aspects of my life, I felt judgment like by people and let it affect me. But then all of a sudden I'm in this position, and someone says to me, when people ask you questions, you have to just kind of ask them a question and rephrase it. You can't be answering questions, and you need to be very aware of the things that you say and the people that you're around and the things that you're doing. And all of a sudden I was like, but I am already afraid to do all those things anyway. I'm already afraid of people's judgment. I'm already afraid of like making the wrong decisions or saying the wrong things. And now I'm in this position where I have to really be accountable. And I don't want to be like the source to someone being upset at someone else because this is what I said and it's in a disagreement with either from what my church says, or anyway, I just didn't want to be in that place. So that was very, very hard for me to
feel that pressure.
The pressure was huge. I already had the sense that I didn't belong. And so I'm like, how could I be in this position, put in this position when I already feel like I don't belong because I don't do things as perfect as this person, or I don't look like this person, or my children do activities that are different than other kids' activities. So I had already felt this sense of not belonging. So all of these, and then the pandemic, of course. And so these are all the things that are like going on this treadmill in my brain. I had already been listening to your podcasts, and we've lived away for several years from you, but so I had, we had brief contact every once in a while. And just one day I thought, you know what, I've got to call Heidi. I've got to get out of this place. I've got to get out of my head. And I think that was like, the first step is always the hardest, but getting out of your head can be really difficult because you don't really realize just where you are.
Yeah. Right. And you don't realize you're inside the frame. You really need someone to help you on the outside, really see it and help you take the steps to get out. I'm so glad that you did. In our first conversation, one of the things you brought up, a specific insecurity that you had, was you told me, we haven't even told our youngest daughter, how old was she at the time? Like 6 or 7. We haven't told her that she
was 6,
adopted. And I know it's not a secret in the bigger sense, but you hadn't had that conversation. And you said, I want to have the confidence to have that conversation. I'm not sure like what's going on for me in that too.
Yeah. So I had someone come up to me and say to me, you need to tell your daughter that she's adopted. And I'm like, well, she knows she's adopted. And then all of a sudden I like sat there and I was like, I don't think we've ever really had the conversation with her. It wasn't that we didn't want to tell her.
Yeah.
I was never ashamed to tell her. I mean, it's something that it's a beautiful story. And we love her birth mom and we love her birth grandparents. And in fact, we get a present every year from her birth grandparents. And we talk about them. And sometimes we go and visit them when we are out their way. And so it wasn't a secret. It was just that it had never been explained to her what adoption was. And she started saying things like, Mommy, when I was in your tummy, what did it feel like? Or Mama, when I was first born, and then my niece had a baby and she was breastfeeding. And so she'd say these things, she'd ask me those questions. And all of a sudden I was in this place where I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't have the words.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely did not have the confidence to tell her.
What were you worried about? Like, tell us your concerns.
I had two concerns. I think my main concern is I want her to love me the same as she loves me now. Will that be different? Will that love look different to me? And will it feel different? And then the other concern I had was for her birth mother, because I wasn't sure if I would put her in a position of being uncomfortable. And that wasn't a huge concern, but it still was a concern because we haven't talked to her for a very long time. And so, but my biggest concern was, what will this look like? And will she still look at me like her mom? Will she still love me the same? Now, my husband always wanted to talk about it, but he needed me to be in the right framework. He needed my head to be in the right place. I just think that I all of a sudden developed some kind of an insecurity in telling her, even though we're so proud of, the journey that we've taken. And
no, that takes a lot of courage for yourself to kind of identify, hey, I have this fear. Like I have this insecurity. Let me bring it out to the light. Let me kind of see what it is and talk about it. So that takes a lot of courage and trusting yourself to even have that insecurity and to see it and admit it, even just to yourself. And so the interesting thing is then for about 6 months, the first 6-8 months of our coaching, we actually didn't coach specifically and we didn't talk about the adoption. And share with my listeners, what were some of the examples of changes that were taking place inside of you? Like what kind of insights were you starting to have? How was your confidence growing? Because we were talking about all of this with other situations that were going on for you.
Yeah. So I think one of my big works in progress is I'm quite the perfectionist. And
you're in good company.
Yes. And so if I do something, I want it to look a certain way. If I'm in charge of like giving instructions to a group of people and I do flower arranging and sometimes I will teach classes and I'll walk by someone's flower arrangement. I'll go, can I just trim this right here for you? I mean, maybe they didn't want it trimmed, but for me, it was like, it just doesn't look quite right. I just need to do that for you. That's just part of my perfectionist tendencies. I don't like to look like a failure. So as we went through coaching, it became very clear to me that being a perfectionist has not served me well in a lot of ways, because if you have a lot of tendencies where you want to control a situation that you're not allowing others to experience, like I even in their lives, like my oldest daughter, like there were still certain aspects of her life that I wanted to control. So learning to stay in my lane and learning that, I can do what's possible in my lane, but it's not my job. I mean, I'm still her mom, but she's got to experience life too. I can't control that. And then I really felt a shift where I really started to really lean into, and not drive into, but lean into the Savior's lane. Like let that lane be his. I mean, There's a lot of things in my life where I wanted to control, and I realized that has nothing to do with me. And this is either someone else's lane or it's the savior's lane. And I just kind of have to like relinquish that control. So there was this huge shift of learning to like relinquish control. It wasn't useful to feel like you needed to be in control all the time. So I felt like in doing so, I have been developing a lot more grace and compassion for people. In the sense that I'm not trying to manage them anymore. I'm seeing them more.
Oh, that's beautiful. Seeing someone. Yeah. Not just managing them.
Like my oldest daughter, like I sent her off to college this year and I see her more. I don't feel like I have to manage her.
So Alisha, like what were some things that you stopped worrying about as much? Because I could see a real shift for you over those months of being worried about what other people think about us, which is such a human worry as it is, if we're running just on default on our lower brain.
Yeah.
And so what were some things you think you kind of stopped worrying about, or you could manage the worry more?
So I love the tool of the CTFAR. I feel like when I would look at circumstances and certain emotions would pop up and I'd start to feel insecure in a moment or in a circumstance. It was so nice to like briefly like go through my head and think, I don't have to like react to this situation and I don't have to feel judgment from this situation. So I feel like, that tool has taught me also to put judgment aside a little bit. Like I have found myself being freed from a little bit of judgment because I don't know what someone else is thinking. I don't know what their expectations of me are unless they spell them out. Like if someone says, this is what I want, then I know what their expectations are. But to try to read into someone's expectations is like impossible. You don't know someone else's thoughts. So, and those are some of the things that I have really learned to utilize. So like when I do feel like judgment is coming up in my head, I mean, I just have to I don't put it to the back of my head, but I kind of pick it apart for a little bit. And I've realized that the judgment isn't really a reflection of me if that's what I'm feeling. And 9 times out of 10, when I start to feel judgment from someone else, it really isn't the situation. It's just me thinking that. If I feel judgment from someone else or a situation, or that I didn't like fulfill my end or whatever, if I do pick that apart, I walk away thinking, well, it's not my situation to manage. That's not about me. Whereas before, that probably wouldn't have come out of my mouth. This isn't about me. Like those words were not my words.
Would have stayed kind of ruminating on that.
Yeah. So I remember, we've talked a lot about that with like our emotions and stuff. And I find myself saying that a lot. Like, this is more about you, or this is more about them than it is about me. And so I've been listening more on that and asking more questions, learning how to ask the question, why or how, or instead of making my own judgments in my own head.
And like responding. Yeah. And having that space to be able to choose, now, how do I like want to respond? So tell me about the night that you did tell your youngest daughter that she was adopted. Tell me what you were thinking and feeling. How did she react? This was just one of the most beautiful things afterwards when you told me about this. And I really want my listeners to just hear this, because this is what is amazing about when we change, what we can gift our children. So tell us about that night.
So I had been telling myself for a while, if Gigi says this, then I will respond this way. But my husband needs to be there too, because he needs to be part of this conversation. So I had been waiting for just the right moment for this to happen. And we were reading our books and doing our good night prayers and practices, what we do before bed and tucking in and stuff. And she said, Mommy, when you were pregnant with me, I don't remember the exact question. When you were pregnant with me, did you know I was going to be a girl or something like that? And I said, well, let's just talk about that for a minute. Now, that Mommy had a hard time having babies. And sometimes mommies have to have tummy mommies, and mommies who are willing to be the person to bring other children into the world. And she's looking at me like I have two heads at this point. And my husband,
Right.
like, I think he was going to pass out because he was like, are we doing this? We're talking about this?
Like, okay, here we are.
He's like, just going with it. And I thought at the time, I'm like, we're just going with this too. I didn't have the words. So then I said, I was never pregnant with you. You were never in my tummy. So I can't answer that question for you. And maybe someday you'll be able to ask your tummy mommy that question. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, I didn't give birth to you. And I said, you have a really loving tummy mommy who loved us and gave us this gift. And so we had this really beautiful conversation about it. And at the very end, before I shut off her light, she said, Mommy, thank you for trusting me enough with this.
Oh my goodness.
And that's not usually her language. And I really feel like for me, that was so revealing that, number one, I needed the confidence to tell her, but I needed to trust her with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think leading up to that, I wouldn't have launched in to say that if I didn't trust her.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just so wise of her to say, thank you for trusting me with this.
Yeah.
And over the next few days, she did have questions, and she had said to her piano teacher, who's a friend of mine, did you know I was adopted?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, actually, I did. And she goes, you did? And she said, yeah, I was there when you came home from the hospital. And then she pulled out pictures of her adopted nieces and nephews and talked to her a little bit about that. So I have felt really grateful that I've had, that I have this really great support network around me, that when Gigi has a question, that these moms can launch right in and talk about how special it is, or talk about other people that they know that are adopted. And, if we had told her when she was younger, she would still have the same questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the time was right. Would it have been better that she'd known it all along? Probably, because then I wouldn't have, as the longer the time went on, I wouldn't have felt so insecure.
Mm-hmm.
But I really felt through, the first 6 months of going through this and kind of talking about my feelings, I really felt my confidence grow, and knowing that, okay, I can't manage how she's going to react to this until she knows. So it's an amazing experience.
When you told me about this a day after it happened, it has really brought me to tears every single time I think about it, because in my mind, I see you having this conversation, but I see you gifting her this love, this confidence, like that trust. So her even saying that night, like what you gave her is this sense of wholeness, this like never having this sense of there's something wrong or there's something less, or whatever kind of our brain could kind of say would be that, like different is maybe not as good or whatever it could be. You gifted to her because you worked on yourself, because you worked on your love, because you worked on your confidence, even the confidence that she might become a teenager who says something mean to you. You working on that, you in that moment gifted to her this supreme sense of you are whole, you are loved. And like that, to me, there's just nothing more beautiful for us to be doing at any time for our kids.
Yeah, I even for my older daughter, I mean, I felt this shift in her too. When we actually talked about it, I felt she felt more able to show her love in a different way too.
Oh, interesting.
So that has been a really amazing experience. And I honestly don't know that I would have had the confidence to just come out and say what needed to be said, and know that she would love me beyond more. I think she loves me more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think so too, because she now knows you trust her. She has seen that trust, that confidence, and we respect people. Despite they don't need to be perfect or flawless. That's not the type of thing that brings connection, but even just that vulnerability of the whole conversation.
And they don't have to be older.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't have to wait till she was 18 to tell her.
Mm-hmm.
we need to trust our kids. We need to show them that we do trust them.
Yeah. I mean, she asked the question, so she was open for the answer to that.
I don't think she was expecting that answer, but
no, it sounds like she wasn't.
She wasn't expecting it. It kind of blindsided her too. We were all kind of just like going with it at the moment, but
yeah, but your comfort level, I think it's wise if we know we're not going to be able to handle a conversation the way we want to. It's okay to step back and to get our own bearings and to get anchored, the way I like to say that, and to like make sure we're okay with something and then like have that conversation. So you launched your oldest to college last year, like I did. How have you experienced that year? Tell me some of the tools like that we've been working on that you feel have helped you with some of the confidence and sense of self with that.
So my daughter is a state away, so she's 7.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Still get on a plane and go visit her. Driving is a little long, but I can still do that. I'm not going to say that it's been easy.
Okay. Yeah.
But I am really proud of how my husband and I have reacted to just letting her make decisions.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I am somewhat of a helicopter mom. I did park my helicopter a long time ago, but I still like to know what's going on from a distance.
Yeah.
And so I would call her every day. Hey, how was your day? And she'd be like, Mom, I just talked to you yesterday. I'm like, okay. So I'd go a day and then she'd call me and she's like, you didn't call me yesterday. She was ready to leave the coop, right? But it still has been, it's so great to feel like you have complete confidence in your child to make mistakes and know that it's going to be okay. So you taught me very early on the definition of the word perfect. I mean, that for me, like the Hebrew word for perfect is complete. When you taught me that, that is one of those things that goes through my head probably a million times a day. The reason I wanted to bring that up with Grace is because I'm like, she doesn't have to be the perfect college student. She doesn't have to even get good grades if she's trying. I just want her to live this complete life. And so I was able to put this like idea of being this perfect person or this perfect child. And what is she doing when she's away from me? And I just hope she's making right decisions. I didn't think about any of those things because I knew that she was just going to live a good life. And it feels really good to say that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have felt that comfortable if we hadn't talked through all of my other insecurities along the way.
Here's one last question that I think you've had some really good shifts in. I see how you have really shifted your energy in like the stories you're kind of telling yourself and really become the hero a lot more of situations and your emotions. Maybe talk for a minute or two about the changes you have felt in yourself regarding that.
So I had a traumatic brain injury about 30 years ago, which I've always used as the excuse for reacting in the moment. I've always like made decisions in the moment, or I've had a very charged reaction to a circumstance or something like that, and then thought about it afterwards. And we all do that. I've been able to like really, if I feel myself getting upset or something has happened, I'm better able to control my reaction. So I'm able to, which I didn't ever think was possible, to really sit back and look at like a circumstance or feel like, ask myself, what am I feeling here? Where is this coming from? What is the what's the situation? What's going on in the situation? And I think the biggest shift for me has been, I just think I've grown stronger in the fact that I'm more comfortable just being me and making decisions, and not being afraid that I'm going to react in the wrong way or say the wrong things. I still say the wrong things all the time, but I don't feel as much sorrow after I react to something because I'm not having these huge reactions.
Emotional. Reactions.
Right. So I think the biggest shift for me is that I am able to give myself what I would like to say is I'm able to show myself more love and grace and compassion. And even if I do react to something, I mean, it's not always perfect, but I'm also able to sit back and go, well, you're human. And I'm not judging myself so harshly. Or at the same time, I'm not judging other people.
Yeah.
Like I'm able to look at other people and think, gosh, they're living the same life I'm living. They're having the same human experience that I'm having.
Yeah.
Showing myself grace and compassion is huge. But giving it to other people, like I thought that I did that. I thought that I was empathetic, and I thought that I was helpful, and I thought that I was, kind to people. And sometimes I was like going out of my way to be kind to people, and I was kind of exhausting myself in that. But I don't think I've necessarily stopped that, but I've also realized that it doesn't matter what I can do for someone else. I still can't manage their feelings.
Yeah.
And so I think part of my stress was feeling stress for other people. And so taking that away, that element of feeling like, I know I can help, I know I can do this for someone else, and realizing that I really can't do anything for anyone else. I can listen. And I think I listen more and I ask better questions so that that person is able to maybe solve their own problems. I don't feel like I have to solve problems for people anymore.
Yeah.
So for me, that's huge. And in the same time, boundaries is a huge issue for me. Like I've never been able to express my needs. This is still a work in progress, but I'm learning to express my needs only because I'm able to identify what I need. And I'm able to ask myself that.
Right. Which comes in that slowing down of like, oh, I'm experiencing this, which I think the CTFAR has helped you like, wait, let me slow down. And what am I really experiencing here? And like, what is my need? Yeah. I've seen a big change in that too. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. I asked my husband, what this last question, I'm like, what shifts have you seen in me? And that's what he said too. He's like, I've seen a ton of shifts. And he says, this is probably the biggest area is that you have become more balanced. Like I don't feel things like they're as big. I still have feelings, but those feelings don't feel as big as they used to.
And more manageable. Yeah.
And I feel like I have more words for them too.
Because when we get the words and when we can express it, then all of a sudden we've said that we're in charge of it, which you and I have talked about. Like then it's this thing that we're in charge of and they're not in charge of us.
That's probably the biggest shift is that I now feel that I'm in charge of my own life. I can make the things that I say matter. And it's not that they didn't matter before. I just didn't feel like they mattered.
Yeah, I very much went through that change myself too. So to wrap up here, what is something that you could share with someone? There's probably several listeners out there that are like on the fence. Should I sign up for coaching? What has been the change that doing the individual one-on-one coaching has really pushed you through? Because I know listening to podcasts is wonderful, and I do that myself and can make a lot of growth. When do they know, okay, I really got to get some like personalized help?
I wouldn't wait till you feel stuck. I wouldn't want you to wait till you feel like this is like the last resort. My life is out of control. One of the things I've loved about coaching, and this is what I'm going to say to you, is you can listen to podcasts, you can write down things, you can take notes. The most helpful thing with working with you one-on-one is that I have been writing things down and I've been challenging myself. So there's actually a lot of work involved. So when I come back with you the following week, you're going to ask me. I mean, there's some accountability involved in that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been doing it. That's why there's been this change. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have been doing it.
So there's the work so the one-on-one coaching for me has really helped me to work through. And you've been able to see beyond, like I will tell you, this is what I'm experiencing. And you've been able to put words to those experiences. And then together we've been able to define them and talk through them. when I say I was stuck, it was because I didn't have the words and I couldn't define and I couldn't work through them. I sometimes would want to circumvent the problem instead of just going straight through it and being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, and making that phone call is really uncomfortable, especially because you're a friend of mine. Would it be easier if you were a stranger? I don't think so, because I already had a love for you and a trust for you. So the first phone call is probably the hardest, but it's okay. Like now I tell everyone they need a life coach.
I know, me too.
Coach. Everyone needs a life coach.
I know. I tell everyone that in my family too.
Like, this would be so much easier if you had someone to talk through it with you.
To help you explain that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Like, I think your experiences, especially that specific experience that you had with your daughter and that adoption, like that night, it still is very powerful and emotional to me just to think of that, because I think that's the gift of us changing and us improving and us investing in ourselves as mothers. It's this generational change that we can make to then pass it on to our families. And that's what we want. We don't want anything else. Like, we want them to know they're loved and for them to know they can make mistakes. They don't have to be perfect. And
to feel trust.
And to feel the trust. Yeah. Feel our trust. And we first have to, trust ourselves and then trust them. Thank you very much, Alisha.
You're welcome. Thanks, Heidi.
Wasn't that awesome? Now check out the YouTube video that I have made to go along with this episode, where I talk about some specific things that often we'll say that reveal our own insecurities. And in her discussion with her daughter, there were several things that she didn't do. And because she had the confidence that she didn't need to say these things that often we do, that again are revealing these internal insecurities that we have. You can check that out on my YouTube channel. If you would like personalized weekly private one-on-one coaching to give your family the gift of your confidence, sign up for a consult call at HeidiBenjaminson.com. A confident mother is the greatest gift to her family, not a perfect mother. Our families want us to feel confident, anchored, and calm. I can help you uncover this version of yourself. Have a great week.